NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo. Hi everyone, how you doing? I hope you're healthy and safe this winter. If you're anywhere in North America and parts of Europe, this winter storm is amazingly terrifying. And if you're stuck in it right now, and you're lucky enough to have power so that you can watch this video, or maybe this is after you've had power returned to you. NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo. Please know that nature is a reflection of the world condition. As a Buddhist, we know they're not mutually exclusive. Our environment is ourselves. No, you didn't cause the storm, but human mind, our energy, does affect, does influence. Does that mean that we wouldn't have global warming without a lot of people having negative thoughts? That's a silly association. And see, that this is the kind of thinking that leads people to thinking that Buddhists are out of their minds or magical thinking. That's not it at all. The earth is the earth, the universe is the universe, and humanity is in the scope of the universe and the physical reality of everything. We're a pretty insignificant speck. For instance, long after human beings would extinguish themselves on this planet, for instance, the earth would go on and do what it needs to, whether you call that recovery or just another form. The earth doesn't care. Okay. But we, being of sentient mind, it's all on you and I. So, yeah. What's that really about? It's about our survival, our life condition, our quality of life, our experience of life. That falls on us. It's not the climate that's hurting us. It's not the earth that's hurting us. It's not the universe. It's not the gods that are hurting us. You see, this whole inculcating culture of magical thinking that our lives are due to something outside of our control, right? It's in so many forms, from hardcore religious brainwashing craziness to the serenity prayer. I mean, and some of you will go, well, wait a minute. Well, to accept the things I cannot change, as a Buddhist, I can't accept that. There are things that are difficult to change, to influence, but everything is malleable. Why? Because everything in the universe is instantiated moment to moment. The universe is potential, writ large. Each one of the things we observe, experience, is happening moment to moment. Nothing sits still. So the very idea that there is unchangeable things is an aberration. That's a very egotistical statement. Because nothing sits still. Everything is in motion. Everything is constantly changing. Does that mean that with the wave of a hand we can alter the universe? Of course not. But it does mean the mindset that we should operate from is that this individual, the self we're so enamored of attaching ourselves to, isn't permanent. And therefore the onus is on us moment to moment to moment to make the best decisions, the best considerations, the best levels of brotherhood, humanness, life-affirming, amazed thinking. I don't do it often, but every few years, maybe more often than I recollect, I watch that old black and white movie, It's a Wonderful Life. And for all its religious rhetoric that's thrown into it, it's Christmas time, people are talking about the angels singing and the whole, if you can just, and it's hard for me, if you can push away the religiosity in it, the story, Capra's story, the idea of desperation to the point of killing oneself in this movie. Yeah, it's a Christmas movie. George wants to end his life. He utters the words that we've heard ourselves or others say so many times, I wish I was never born. But with the intensity of not a cliche, but of really meaning that. If you've ever in your, come on, is there a teenager out there who hasn't uttered words of either those exact words or something similar? This is the human crisis. That's why I watch this movie. Not because it's a great movie, but because Capra's story here of being so overwhelmed that you just don't want to participate anymore. Yeah? And then recalling, even in this experience of intense misery, that there have been moments. Maybe they were just fleeting. It doesn't matter. One moment you can recall that was blissful, that was amazing. It could be just the most ephemeral thing. And that, in and of itself, that moment, without regard to everything else, that moment, that's what makes you cry. That's what makes you remember how beyond amazing life can be experienced. And ultimately, even if it's just one moment you can remember, that's what dispels the thoughts of self-destruction. That's what dispels that moment of, that keeps you alive, keeps you going. This is a time of year when a lot of people are on that line. And if you're there, let me remind you, you have at your avail. My phone's going to be going off every now and again here. I'm not turning it off because I have loved ones that are driving around in this weather, and it's made me nervous, so I want to be attuned in case I get a call. So apologies for that. But you have in your possession the practice of Buddhism. And you could boil it down to that one spark that you remember where life was amazing. Buddha says you can experience this all the time. That when you chant NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo, you are enlivening in your life experience that amazement, that spark. Bring that energy, that, I don't know, crazed appreciation, that expectation. Bring that to your Butsudan. Bring that to your mandala. Bring that to your daimoku. And I promise you, you will access that amazement, that life experience, and it will change you. It will change, it will influence every aspect of your momentum as you move through time. And the more you do it, the more you will be influenced by it. It's not an otherness. It's not from around you. It's not from a higher power. It is you. It is your sentient mind that can do this all the time. But it takes effort. Like anything else, you must train your mind, right? Just like jumping jacks or writing or learning a programming language. You're programming your mind to focus its filters of understanding and apprehension and conception and perception and cognition to go through this clear filter of amazement. This is the practice of Buddhism, my friends. And it is at times like this time of year when so many humans are confronting everything from elation, as built on questionable foundations as it might be, to deep, profound self-questioning. Don't lose sight. Don't lose sight of the amazing, sparkling universe that's yours to experience for such a brief amount of time. Come on, get back on it. Don't let negativity and doubt and all the rest, even the power outages and the bad weather, don't let it take hold of you. Yes, there is tragedy. Experience it, absolutely. As Nichiren says, celebrate what there is to celebrate, suffer what there is to suffer, but always, always with a mind of Buddha-ness. Always with a mind of incredible, amazing life. Yes, even in misery, there is amazement. I'm not belittling anyone suffering out there. Don't take it that way, please. NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo. Thank you for being here. Thank you for liking and subscribing, for being part of this Sangha. Your practice is amazing. And this I say as we move on in this particular book by, if I'll ever remember his name, Masaharu Anesaki, published at the turn of the 20th century, from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. This was published 1916, was the copyright, but I'm sure he thought and taught on these subjects for many years before he sat down to write this book. And when last we spoke, in the last video, we were talking about Nichiren's impact of his study, and especially with a focus on the Lotus teaching, the Lotus Sutra. So, the Lotus of Truth is a rich treasury of inspiration and moral precepts, prophetic visions, poetic imagery, philosophical speculations, and practical admonitions for living one's life to the full, yes? From this book, all ages and every man in Buddhist countries derives some sort of instruction and inspiration, each according to his needs and disposition. Most Buddhists of a speculative trend of mind occupy themselves in elaborating the teachings of the oneness of truth, the doctrine of the one vehicle, soul road. Now, this is our author speaking, right? Notwithstanding the three gateways opened by Buddha or Shakyamuni Buddha, in Chapter 2 on tactfulness or expedient means. Many others inclined to fantastic imagination and delighted with supernatural glories were keen for heavenly visions and apocalyptic scenes. There's always the dramatic evangelists among us, and they seized on the teachings of the Lotus Sutra to go that route with Buddhist teachings. Obviously, the subtext here, not everyone understands the profound meaning of Shakyamuni's teachings. Rather, they take the teachings from the words and the stories to indicate more magical thinking, when in fact that's not at all what Buddhism is about. But there it is, yeah? Humans. Many others, again, found objects of worship in the deities of mercy and benefaction, such as Avalokitesvara, right? Much was written on the Lotus: philosophical treatises, miracle stories, poems, and prayers. The book also inspired many painters and sculptors, and we have a rich store of works of art whose subjects are taken from it. This author has actually written books on Buddhist art. But there was none until Nichiren. We could argue that point, but since we're talking about Nichiren, okay, who read the book in its original way, who derived from it such a wonderful power of strenuous, he says militant life, but extremely dedicated life, right? And thereby lived a life of striving toward the ardent zeal exemplified by primeval disciples of Buddha-ness, yeah? Indeed, Nichiren deemed himself to be an embodiment of the text, a personal version of its teachings and prophecies, and a living testimony to them. Remember, Nichiren, in his own writings, identified his life with the personage of Jogyo, right? Superior Practices Bodhisattva, from the Lotus Sutra, the four leaders of, right? One of those four leaders being Nichiren, took on that mantle as the exemplar of his own life. He related to it. How did he carry out his life in accord with this idea and attain to a full conviction of his mission, his life's purpose? Foreordained in the lotus of the perfect truth. So that's how he closes out that chapter. And we start the next, Nichiren's public appearance and persecution. So, Anasaki has set us up with Nichiren's birth, his lifespan, his dedication through monk studies, through different temples, going to the very height of Mount Hiei, the height of Buddhist scholarship in Japan, where he delves into the library of teachings there from Dengyo, sees all the more, obviously, how the teaching correctly understood was spread by Dengyo hundreds of years before Nichiren himself, and how in the intervening years, centuries, that brilliant understanding of Shakyamuni's teachings was not just lost, it was manipulated, contorted, made him very upset. Basically shook his fist at these other schools of Buddhism for taking what was amazing and clear and turning into political theater. It enraged him, in fact. How could you do that? Look at what's happening to the country right now. Well, you and I could say the same thing about the world in general. Why can't you get this lesson? What you're doing is so pathetic. You don't understand what you're doing, going to war, taking over property. What are you thinking? Right? Well, the answer is they're not. So Nichiren took it upon himself, certainly from a citizen of Japan who had seen this amazing light and was now operating in darkness. He was determined to turn that light back on, to get people to pay attention that they have in their bones, their history, their ancestry, their living flesh, the teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha. So yeah, that's how he took the Lotus Sutra, how he inculcated into his very being, and that is our mentor. That is who we're emulating. We want to inculcate the brilliance, the bright light of Shakyamuni's teaching into our own lives. We want to illuminate this world and everyone in it so that we can all fully experience this amazing life. That's the Bodhisattva path. So, I guess I could stop the video there, but let's go on. Let's see what then occurs to Nichiren as he's put this robe of understanding and trajectory, mission, life purpose, as he puts it into motion. Because it might indicate familiar struggles that each of us has. In a small way, in a large way, the experience is the same. Because the experience is personal, intimate. In your mind, in my mind. We don't have to think in huge numbers. What we need to think of is the importance of our little light. It only takes a little light to light a fuse of enlightenment, yeah? The young monk, now no longer a seeker after truth, but a reformer, filled with ardent zeal, conviction, right? Bade farewell to the great center of Buddhism on Mount Hiei, and went back to the old monastery of Kiyozumi, where he first started his own journey as a young boy, yeah? Which he had left 15 years before. He visited his parents, and they were his first converts. So, being loving parents, they listened to their young man now with what he had learned and what he understood of Buddhism, and they were so impressed, they thought, wow, you really have learned a lot. You've opened our eyes. We're now curious to see what else you can. You are our guiding light in training our minds, in Buddhism, in our lives' mental cognition, you might call spiritual. But it's an internal thing, not an external thing, right? His old master and fellow monks welcomed him. Hey, how you been, Nichiren? Wait, man, how was all the 15 years you've been gone? What'd you learn in Mount Hiei? I can't wait till you share it with us. But to their minds, Nichiren, the former Rensho, the Sun Lotus, right, was nothing more than a promising young man who had seen the world and studied at Mount Hiei. Right? He was still, their inferior, if you will. But he'd gone and seen a lot of things, so they were keen to hear about his vacation, right? His travels. Keeping silence about all his plans and ambitions, Nichiren retired for a while to a forest near the monastery. Yeah, these people aren't ready to hear what I have to say. I'm glad to be welcomed. I have a bed. I have food to eat. But, when you know something, and you go back. It's like when you leave home as a young person or even an older person, and you go and you study and you exist, just existing abroad. This is the nature of travel, isn't it? When you go back to where your earlier roots are, especially separated by 10, 15 years, you suddenly understand everybody there and the way they talk and the way they think from a very different perspective, right? I mean, enlightenment or not, enlightenment in great measure is a widening of your experience. And you go back home and you see how your mother's thoughts are bound and how your father is so limited and how your brothers and sisters are just stuck in the loop of their regionalism. And it can be tough because you want to love them just as much as you did when you left, but it's almost like you're afraid to say anything because you know it will go through these muddy filters and you don't think that way anymore. And so the look in their faces, in their eyes, in the way they move around you, it's like you're now a foreign thing to them. And they can't understand the points of views that you have. Well, imagine how Nichiren felt. Yeah. Everyone in the monastery supposed that he was practicing the usual method of self-purification, which they themselves employed. Yeah, because that's they hadn't grown. They were just exercising the same old horse, right? They hadn't expanded their enlightenment. They were just doing habit energy. But in fact, Nichiren was engaged in a quite different task and occupied with his original idea, neither shared nor guessed by anyone else. How could they? They hadn't even endeavored to study their own practice with that fervent desire, that the meaning of it. They were just doing the thing, right? The 7 days of his seclusion, so for a week he just stayed out of the monastery. How am I going to deal with this? And the minute I open my mouth, they're going to be shocked. What? They have to. I mean, this is where I started. I have great compassion for this school, but Jesus, they've got to expand their minds. They've just got to know what I've discovered. Otherwise, I'll be mistreating them. Right? Buddhist compassion. They must expand their practice to the meaning of it, the whole reason for being Buddhist. They have to stop playing around. I have to say something. But how to say it? Right? After 7 days of his seclusion, as the tradition says, was a period of fervent meditation in preparation for launching his plan of reformation and proclaiming his new doctrine of Buddhism. He was going to launch it from the very place where he started. In his mind, the most compassionate thing he could do. Not sure everyone was going to experience it that way. When his season of meditative practice had reached, this keeps saying prayer, and I'm avoiding that word because it's misleading, right? When his season of meditative practice had reached the stage when he was ready to transform it into action, when he chanted about it enough, Nichiren one night left the forest and climbed the summit of the hill, which commands an unobstructed view of the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. When the eastern horizon began to glow with the approaching daybreak, he stood motionless, looking toward the east, and as the golden disk of the sun began to break through the haze over the vast expanse of waters, a loud voice, a resounding cry, broke from his lips. It was NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo. Nichiren, for the first time, as it is known, proclaiming that he, with his body present, with his mind focused, would invoke, instantiate, support, spread, be immersed in NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo, the culminating teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lotus of Truth. This is what we are emulating every time we chant the Daimoku. Don't forget that. Here he says adoration, but it's not mere adoration. It's a complete cellular commitment in body and mind to the lotus of perfect truth. NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo. I am that truth. This was Nichiren's proclamation of his doctrine to heaven and earth, making the all-illuminating sun his witness. It happened early in the morning of the 28th day of the 4th lunar month, May 17th, 1253. The proclamation of the Lotus of Truth with the sun as witness was indeed the first step in translating into action the ideal symbolized in his name, the Sun Lotus, Rensho. After this unique proclamation, Nichiren came back. Now, he says unique proclamation. I'll grant you that the Namu portion, which, as you know, if you've followed this channel for any amount of time, I am very adamant about keeping intact, because there are two aspects of being, yes, Na and Mu. It may be unique in Nichiren, in his fathoming of the truth of the NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo as his particular raison d'être, right? But this wasn't the first time that NaMuMyoHoRenGeKyo was uttered, even as a ritual, an invocation, a chant. I mean, you can go back to the days of Miaolo, Dengyo, Tendai, right? Chi. There's a long history because it's the name of the teaching. And throughout the history of Buddhism and other philosophical or religious practices, the incantation of the title of a teaching, not uncommon. But the way Nichiren approached it, that you could say was unique. To be the embodiment of that teaching, really, it's the highest invocation of any student, isn't it? To reach the full ideals of a teaching, not every student, not every follower thinks of what they're doing in that way, right? Most practices, whether they're religious or not, are about mimicking, mimesis, just going through the motions, from very weakly to very strongly. But to actually take the teaching as the very cellular being of what the teaching is grasping at, that's a different kind of a conviction, dedication, resolve. This is what Nichiren is asking of us. This is what Shakyamuni was asking of us. But not everyone is prepared for that. However, with the teaching of the Lotus, we have a very embarrassingly easy method for training our mind to do just that. Just chant. Really? Is that all it takes? Try it. If you're serious, if you're not just playing at it, if you're focused, dedicated, every energetic aspect that you can muster to achieve the Lotus of Truth, yeah, you will know. You just will. Like sticking your hand in a fire proves to you that flesh burns. It's not a qualification. It just happens. Because it's truth. You can talk about it mystically all you want, but you gonna burn. Right? If you put your hand in a fire, not if you chant. All right. So what happens with this invocation, right? After this unique proclamation, Nichiren came back among human beings, right, the people that is the monastery, and at noon of the same day, in an assembly hall facing the south, he preached his new doctrine and denounced the prevailing forms of Buddhism to an audience composed of his old master, fellow monks, and many others. So this wasn't just, he makes it sound impromptu, but they were ready. Okay, Nichiren's gone out in the forest to get his thoughts together. Can't wait to say what he's going to say. Let's invite some friends. Let's invite the mayor, right? The city council, because this is going to be good. Nichiren's going to enlighten us with the things that he's learned from Mount Hiei. This will be his reintroduction to our monastery and all the Illuminati, right? The important elite around us, and that will signal our reinvigorated importance in the community. Our temple will be best because, Nichiren, the Sun Lotus, after 15 years of education, man, he's going to blow people's mind. Oh, yeah. There was none who was not offended by his bold proclamation and fierce attack. Uh-oh. Murmurs grew to cries of protest, and when the sermon had been finished, everyone assumed that the poor megalomaniac was out of his mind. He's mad. What the hell happened to him up there at Mount Hiei? Oh no! Everybody from the temple now is embarrassed and trying to make up ground with the mayor's like, what is this craziness, right? He upset a lot of people. They weren't ready. The feudal chief ruling that part of the country was so incensed that he would not be satisfied with anything short of the death of the preposterous monk. Hang that son of a bitch, right? How can he say these things? We live on tradition here. This is the way we've done things. You're telling us we're all crazy, we're all wrong, that you know the answer? Megalomaniac, right? Obviously, Nichiren was not politically adept. I don't know about you guys, but I so relate. Yeah. This lord, who was Nichiren's mortal foe throughout the subsequent years of his mission, was watching to attack Nichiren, who was now driven out of his old monastery. Get the hell out of here. Who do you think you are? Oh, my. Oh, what happened? Get out. I don't even want to know. Get the hell out of here. We got to save face somehow. You're going to get us shut down. His master, the abbot, pitied his former pupil and gave instruction to 2 elder disciples to take Nichiren to a hidden trail for escape. Still had a little bit of compassion left in him. Told a couple of head disciples, you got to get Nichiren out of here. They're going to kill him. If not our own people, certainly the townspeople. The mayor wants him dead. Get him out of here. Sneak him out before they're gonna hang him right now. Get him out of here. Ugh. It was in the dusk of that evening that Nichiren made his escape in this way. The sun, which at its rising had beheld Nichiren's proclamation, the sun which at noon had witnessed Nichiren's sermon, set as the hunted prophet made his way through the darkness of the wooden trail. Only the evening glow was in the sky. What must his thoughts have been? What prospect could he have cherished in his mind for his future career and for the destiny of his doctrine? It wasn't the doctrine that was wrong, but his approach. He must have felt so lacking in his ability to communicate this brilliant light of understanding that he had. Did this happen to Shakyamuni? Well, in fact, it did, didn't it? We have many accounts of it. But the expelled prophet now went on a missionary journey in the neighboring provinces and finally settled down in Kamakura, the seat of the dictatorial government. Nichiren just doesn't know how to do anything without heading right straight to the mouth of the lion, right? And with that introduction to the following, I'm going to pause here because I don't want these videos to get too damn long. But can you feel that story? He's not a bad writer, this Masohara Anazaki, right? Now, obviously, he was building his biography here, if you will, on scholarship, on a lot of accounts, a lot of historical writings about the life of Nichiren and Buddhism and so forth. So it's an interesting account, and I hope that you'll continue to listen and join along with me in this voyage. We've only just started the book. We're only about maybe a third, maybe not quite a third, maybe a quarter of the way through it. I think we're going to get a really interesting perspective on not only Nichiren's life, but I think it gives us context for some of our own struggles, occasional doubts, the way that people, we resist new information. So tactfulness, skillful means, they become very important. They're in the Lotus Sutra for a reason. This is a bombshell for the mind. As much as you must appreciate and inculcate its amazing nature, light, you must also understand that you're a samsaric human being amongst others, and to be a bodhisattva is to be a very attentive mind. Buddhist compassion. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's so important to our Sangha. Those of you who are supporting this channel, you also, by doing so, by supporting what we're doing here in this Sangha, you're supporting the website and the bookstore and all of the other resources that I'm trying to develop and maintain to secure our practice. Yeah? Thank you. Thank you for being a part of that, making that happen, and I'll see you in the next one. All right? Bye for now.